All right, Dale, welcome back, my friend. This time we're at the actual campfire.
What that's a great innovation, Mike. Thanks for having me back. I'm. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
It is. I really enjoy the conversations that we get into because, we get to kind of reflect on not only our journeys, but we get a meeting of the minds and we get a little bit of new insight that we get to share. And that's always fun. It's always cool. And the reason that I did the innovation, I made the change, is this campfire seems to open up people. It breaks down those walls, removes those labels, and we can get straight into a deep leveled conversation that really helps other people by inspiring them and finding, a context to move that needle forward.
Right. Well, I'm ready. How should we start?
Well, let's catch up a little bit because it's been a while since you've been on the show. Tell us what's new.
Well, I'm still doing the financial professional services. I I'm in a company called WFG World Financial Group, which a lot of workers say means working for God. And we basically spread financial literacy and awareness and help people like budget and build savings and long-term retirement plans and everything. But basically, on a more personal note, I've been I had a revelation at the solar eclipse on April 8th. People were saying it's going to be apocalyptic, and there were all these predictions that the National Guard, they were going to be right. I don't know what they were saying, but they were saying the National Guard's going to be called out and everything, and everything went smoothly. But actually, I felt that I was inside the whole time, but I didn't see the eclipse itself, but I felt it, and really feel that it was like my Dale's judgment, Dale Edward Walsh's judgment day. And so I felt that like God basically blessed me, and but he also said, you've been diagnosed as mentally ill for 49 years, and get off your butt and start spreading the message you were meant to when they took you away for saying I'm God in 1975. So it was a real like sort of like wake up call for me, and that I've just been sitting in Hackensack since 1976. But now I feel it's my time to like re-enter the world, sort of like Zarathustra after 10 years left his cave on the mountain and came back into humanity. And I feel that that was sort of like the call I was getting from God to like really, start spreading the message that we're all God, we're all fractals of God, we're all like reflections of the divine self, and to basically just say, you know, to help people understand their own Godhead.
To me, it sounds like you're trying to say that you finally started the next chapter of the hero's journey, within your story, because you spent so long up against the turbulence and the adversity of the labels that people were trying to stick on you. You bought into that for a long time and put your life on hold because of it. They made you feel one way, and it was something that was easy for you to buy into. Then you had that experience, and for you, it was the eclipse. For me, it was way back looking in the rearview mirror of my truck on the very first night that I found myself homeless, that I realized it was time to step into that next chapter, go through the rebuilding or the learning of, the hero's journey after you experience that defeat at the beginning of it.
Well, I agree with that. I just like say that actually it's not a chapter; it's a book. And basically, I feel that I started the third book of my life because the first book was Dale, the guy who said he was God and thought he was God and everything. And that basically ended when I had that vision. I don't know if I ever told you about it, but I had a vision of the world being imploded in a thermonuclear holocaust. And basically, I called that The Death of Dale, and that was like in 1984. So I had 30 years as Dale, and then I became Dewey, who was the alter ego. If Dale thought he was God, Dewey thought he was a android, and basically, so I was basically robotically living for 39 years, just like coping and doing everything I needed to do to like get through the times. But now it's the third phase, which is DEW. And as I might have told you, Mike, I feel I have like five personalities: Dale, Dewey, Do, Doug, and Genius. And Do is like the grandfather of all my personalities. He's the one with the wisdom and the experience of like leading people, and that's really what I feel I've stepped into. So it's a lot more than just a chapter. It's a book. It's a new book that I'm writing.
Well, we're always writing new pages of books and chapters and things like that. That's the beautiful part of the human experience. But where it becomes really important, and why I always refer to it as a chapter, a book, or whatever, is those pages that are already written and that have already closed and flipped. You can look back on, you can learn from, and apply them to, the next steps of that book or that chapter.
Right. Well, as I said, as an author who's written six novels, it's just like I really feel that this was like a watershed point of the solar eclipse, because it really was like the point where I finally got to the point where I didn't think I was God anymore. So basically, I said that when Dale died, that was like knocking Dale out of his ego and this God thought that he had. But even Dewey still had that constant thought, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God. And Dew is like content to be a human, an entity into himself. And he doesn't have the need to be God, because that was really the thing that like distinguished Dale Dewey, is this need to be like different and almighty, maybe not almighty, but at least different and unique. And I do has like the assurance that he is unique and that he is like with a mission and everything. That ultimately, I feel that it's time for me to come out of my Hackensack closet and start changing the world in a way that I really can.
It's that point that you just made, though, about the sitting in the closet aspect that really sticks out to me and all that, because metaphorically, we all do that. We get caught up in whatever, whatever picture the ego builds, and we're afraid to step out of that. So we hide within that closet, not really realizing what we're doing in the background, the things that are going on that we can't feel, that we can't see, because we're still making choices. We're still deciding whether or not we're going to turn away from life, or we're going to prepare to turn toward it and start to swim with the river instead against the current.
Right. Well, I agree with that completely. And basically, I feel that I'm not sure. I don't know how I feel about that analogy of like going with or against the current. But I feel that sort of my canoe is turned around, and I am going with the current now. And basically, I've been going against the current for 69 years, but just by my refusal to like get out of my delusion and like basically step into my power as a human, rather than having to cloak it with this God delusion.
It's funny you say that, because actually, before this conversation with you, I was just on another call having a conversation. And one of the things that came up within that conversation that I latched on to, that the guy that was speaking totally overlooked within that very statement, in that very context, is he was striving to mute and silence his own voice, almost as he lived in shame because of the fact that he had these diagnoses. And to me, one thing that I've really discovered through a lot of the recent conversations is those labels that we attach to ourselves, they shouldn't be shameful. They should be something that we embrace, because there's no true healing that can go on without self-acceptance,
Right.
without without befriending yourself and your feelings. I mean, sure, there's the clinical approach where you go in, they put you on some pills, and they might talk to you. They might let you express yourself and possibly even help you discover a few things. But they too prescribe that idea of, let's just shut everything up. Let's not have the hard conversations because there's an easy answer. And within that easy answer, there's no true healing that can go on.
Absolutely. And what I say, Mike, is I've defined schizophrenia as living in a reality that was not conceived on Earth. And genius is a schizophrenic who's integrated his vision into that of the culture, even Matrix, if you want to use it. But so, I'm sort of like, I finally moved away. I mean, for a long time, I would say to everybody I meet, within 5 minutes, I'm a schizophrenic, just sort of like as a defense mechanism, perhaps. But, I've now moved on from saying I'm a schizophrenic with divine delusions to I'm a genius with a magnificent obsession.
And I love that. Honestly, going all the way back to that very first conversation that we had about setting up the first episode. When I look back to where you were then to where you are today as we talk, I can see that, and I see and I feel the aura of a celebration that's beating within your heart. There's a drum celebrating the fact that I'm Dale. I'm 110% unique, and that uniqueness is what gives me a place at the table. And I love that. I love that you expressed that. That is one of the most important points that anybody within this world, within the whole human experience, can understand, is the uniqueness that makes you you is something that you should not turn away from. It's something that you should embrace because it was given to you as a gift.
Well, I bet one of my new routines is I listen to Les Brown every morning, and one of the things he says is, "We were all born unique, but most of us die a copy," and that's one thing that I figured out. I might not be God, I know I'm not God, but I am unique, and I have like my whole history. Whether it's being taken away for saying I was God, or living in the program, not getting married, going back to college as and graduating magna cum laude as a schizophrenic, but and the schizophrenia was like sort of like a unique label that I used in order to define myself. But ultimately, I feel that I know I'm unique. And I think out of that uniqueness, I have a message and a wisdom that I've gathered, especially like in the last 49 years, that's going to be very valuable, especially as we go through these apocalyptic times and everything. But one thing that I've sort of like been harping back to is something I said in one of my books, which is I knew what Dale was up to 20 years before anybody else.
As I'm listening and I'm thinking about different things that I find and draw inspiration from, you point out the fact that, you went through this, you went through that, and ultimately you may not have the degrees hanging up on the wall behind you. And that's cool. That's okay. Because what it does is it shows other people that it's not necessarily the textbook that you need in order to craft and blaze a trail. If you think about Daniel Boone in that whole historic, hero story and saga, there's a bunch of truth beneath that never gets talked about. And it's the fact that when we consider the founding fathers of this country, we all think that they're super educated, they're super bright, they've done this, they've done that. Well, the hard work of actually forging this country was based off a man that the only ability he had to read and write was what he taught himself. He had that fire in that inspiration to go out and pick up just enough knowledge to be able to bring back what he did out in the field to the normalized everyday part of society and make it something that everybody else wanted to go to. Everybody else wanted to follow him to Kentucky. He continued pushing out west because he needed more space, more shoulder room. And I equate that a lot to what we define nowadays as a lot of the labels, the social anxiety, the depression, the things that make us want to run in the house and hide back in the closet because we feel like nobody's going to accept us. But the truth of the matter is, and to get back to the point about the uniqueness that you bring to the campfire of humanity, is without it, there is no hands that move our society forward. There's nothing to lean on to dream. There's nothing to lean on to build goals. And most importantly, there's no fuel to start walking toward all those dreams and toward all those goals.
Well, I I agree completely, and just oh no, I just feel that you know I made my own uniqueness, but ultimately, what I want to do, what you said about labels, having like the alphabet after your name or whatever, that's very good. But ultimately, my legitimacy as a mental health mentoring, helping the family caregivers of those with schizophrenia, isn't like a bunch of initials after my name, because my value as a mentor and being able to help people is based upon my experience with the illness that they don't understand. And I can bring that type of understanding to them so that not only can they communicate better with their loved ones, but this is really the reason I like set up my mentoring is so they can reclaim themselves for themselves outside the codependency of caring for their loved one.
And you just said it perfectly. This is the reason that we're having this beautiful campfire right now, is to put that out there. The fact that if we're able to express the journeys and the hands-on experience to somebody that's turned off by the alphabet behind somebody's name, they're intimidated by it. Those dusty ass old degrees sitting on the wall. A lot of people don't connect with that. They understand that there's going to be no ability to connect and resonate there. So it's a waste of time. However, if they come to someone who's got the hands on aspect, the hands on skill set, there's more ability to relate and bridge that gap between the dusty ass degrees on the wall and the person that's in need.
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely a place for both, because, you need a professional who's seen, like say 500 mentally ill cases and he has that experience and everything. But there's nothing that can substitute for the experience of actually, I mean, yeah, another reason I say unique is just because I feel like I'm extraordinarily recovered from my schizophrenia. And, I want to be able to be the spokesperson for all the schizophrenics who can't speak for themselves. And, and also the family caregivers, so, but, and another thing that people overlook, even when they're, even if they like the doctors or the therapists, is that, these people see your loved one for 45 minutes a month. And you're dealing with it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's not going to go away. So, I think that's why it's so important for someone like me. And actually, Mike, I don't know if I've ever told you this, but it's my ambition to set up some sort of mentoring school for people with diagnosis who are basically recovered so that they can do for specific diagnoses what I'm doing for schizophrenia. So, I'd like to be able to teach a recovered bipolar how to, you know, how to mentor a family caregiver who's dealing with bipolar and everything. And that's one of like my long-term goals. It's just like to set up some sort of like mentoring academy so that not only can people with a mental illness like support themselves, but also they can like use their experience in order to like help people with specific problems of the diagnoses.
And that's a beautiful goal. That's something that I really hope that you're able to manifest, because it really would be very helpful. And the reason that I say it that way is because, if you get back to the older cultures of, the United States and of the world, there was always one building that sat somewhere around the center of the village, and it was the most important and most sacred building. That was the storehouse, because it was a matter of not every year things were going to go right, where you'd be able to produce your own crops, your own food, and having that crutch to where if someone else had an overly successful year, they would store things so that you wouldn't have to starve. And then you would in turn return things back to it as you got back on your feet. And that's something that this mental health community truly needs, is that concept of the storehouse, where it's not just the me mentality or the shame of a label or the diagnosis. It's getting to the human factor, the humanness, the connection of, hey, I've been through this stuff. I found some sort of support. And now that I'm in a position where my glass is full, I'm going to take the overflowing water and I'm going to put it on the shelf where you can come get it when you need it. And trusting in the fact that when you get back on your feet, you'll return that pitcher of water for the next person to drink from, and so on and so forth. And that's a beautiful premonition and goal to get toward. And, if there's any way that I can help with that, I'd be happy to.
Well, I appreciate it. This is another thing I came up with is that a lot of people with serious mental illness have like a very great creative talent. And so I call the coaching program a SMILE, which is a seriously mental ill leadership enterprise. And I call this other idea I have is called RISE, which is a Reality Institute for Schizophrenic Enrichment, which is taking people with a serious mental illness and letting them do what they want, whether it's poetry, painting. I mean, I've seen some incredible painters who are seriously mentally ill and or dancing or acting or whatever. But, helping these people become financially independent through their talents rather than just being, a crutch of the government or their parents or anything. And I think that's just as important as the coaching, but they also like intertwine, because if I can like help people become financially independent who have serious mental illness, then they're more likely to recover and become the mentor that I'm thinking about.
Well, most definitely. In today's world where we get so caught up in the numbers that are in our bank account or the possessions that we have, or chasing even the possessions that we don't have yet for a status symbol, being able to eliminate that, or at least soften, that desire and that need, goes a long way toward forming a safe environment that somebody can then turn inward to the next step and begin that work on themselves to not only heal, but find emotional balance.
Right. Well, I think emotional balance is like key to like recovery, and one of the this is something I always go into a little bit is agnosognosia. Do you know what that is?
Very, very vaguely.
Okay, well, agnosognosia is a term taken from neurology for stroke victims who can't comprehend that there's something wrong with them. And they found that it affects at least 50% of seriously mental ill people. And that means you aren't going to take your medication, you aren't going to go to therapy because you think there's nothing wrong with you, even though you might be like blatantly psychotic. So I mean, obviously, if you're violent, then steps have to be taken. Uh, but agnosognosia is like one of the greatest obstacles to recovery because until you can admit that something's wrong. I basically feel I had agnosognosia for the first 10 years of my illness until I had that vision that I talked to you about of the world being imploded. And that basically knocked me out of my God delusion, but it still lingered for the next 39 years until that solar eclipse when now now I'm sure, Mike, that one Dale is enough for one planet to handle, you know?
You know what, I agree with you there. It's still, it gives you a space to get back to the beginning of the conversation, to celebrate your uniqueness and your individuality while being able to take your story and your knowledge and wisdom and craft it to an audience that desperately needs it. And that to me is a beautiful thing. That's what really the hero journey and the human experience are all about, is taking those adverse moments that make us feel defeated, walking through the shame, walking through the pain, stepping into the growth, learning to be mindfully present regardless of what it is you're up against. And then ultimately, the victory at the end of the movie or at the end of the story becomes this position where you're back on your feet and you're helping others with that story. You're sharing that story while still progressing within your own journey.
Right. Well, one thing that some people ask me about, and they're pretty amazed at this. They say, "How did you have 15 hospitalizations, Dale? I mean, why didn't they like throw you away and throw away the key like after three? And I was very fortunate that I had like my mental unit in Hackensack Medical Center, and they all knew me and everything. But ultimately, it was just like I never really crossed that line into pure insanity. I always said, no matter how crazy you thought I was, I always had my feet on the ground, and that's really like the basis of what I do is that you know when I said I was God, I'll use this analogy. For a long time, I used the equation Dale equals God, Mike. But that evolved into Jesus equals God squared equals Dale cubed. So I was mathematically tied to Jesus and God, but I was always less than them. And the nice thing about that equation is you can substitute any name for Dale in that Dale cube situation. So, I don't know where I'm going. I'm going on a little excursion, but ultimately, the we are all tied up to God. We are all part of Source. We're all a reflection of Source, and that's something that I basically highlighted when I would go psychotic or have an episode and everything. But there was a truth to it that people couldn't deny, and therefore they couldn't like put me away for good because I always bounce back, and that resiliency and everything, it served me very well. But as for the hero's journey, is like, the hero keeps getting back up until he triumphs. And that's really how I feel about myself. And that's why I'm so happy to have reached Dew, because I know Dew is secure not only in his position, but in his self-awareness and his and in his assessment of himself.
And I think that's beautiful. And you point out the fact that resilience is what makes the world go around. Resilience is what makes us continue to stand back up every single time we fall down. And, the more that you honor and you celebrate the fact that that resilience never leaves your heart, the easier getting back up each time ends up becoming because you're practicing.
Well, I think I also have been very fortunate not only to have a family that could take care of me, but also my sense of humor. I think is definitely one of my superpowers, because when things, and that's the thing about about mental illness at this point. People take it so seriously, and they're so upset. They have like such an upset about, like, you can't be helped, you're crazy and everything. But ultimately, you just gotta like get out of yourself and sort of look and say, this is really funny. Here I am back in the hospital again for what, because I reached a new level of enlightenment. And it's like so I think a sense of humor is like one of the essential weapons you can use to not only fight your mental illness, but just for resilience itself.
See, and I think you're onto something there because really it boils down to the vocabulary. I use it all the time within my work. I wrap things around adventure. Adventure makes it fun. The more that you build a lighthearted mentality and vocabulary around the things that you're struggling with, they don't feel so bad. You don't want to run away so fast. You become more willing to embrace it and sit with it. Ultimately, you learn how to befriend whatever that struggle may be and turn the obstacle into the path, turn it into a part of your journey. And
Right.
Dale, as grandfather fire here decides it's time to go to sleep, I want to give you the opportunity to plug yourself and do the self promo thing.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it, Mike, and I want to thank you again for having me on again. It's always like very enlightening, and I with you, I always explore areas that I don't explore with other people. Just I think just because you have like an intuitive knowledge of me, and we hook up on like a high psychic level and everything. But and I want to thank you for that. But so I have a my website is www do live love. This is all one word, DWLIVELOVE, which is which is the therapeutic system I came up with. Just to quickly plug that, live love is it stands for learn, integrate, validate, explore, and then love is listen, observe, value, and express. And that's like an 8-step program I take people through in my do live love journey. And if you're interested in, like, and that's basically for the family caregivers of those with schizophrenia, to help them reclaim their identity. But so there's www.dwlivelove.net. It's not .com, it's .net. Uh, and then I have 5 books on Amazon you can find by putting in poetry collections by D.E. Walsh. And that's I have 5 books that if you want to see what my poetry is about. Uh, and then I guess the one that's most relevant right now that I've been using a lot is Instagram, and it's a Dale E. Walsh, DALE Walsh 55. So that's all. That's all I can think of at the moment.
Well, Dale, it's been a pleasure to reconnect. I always look forward to these conversations because even I get to take something new and interestingly unique away from them. I don't believe in the word goodbye. So until we meet again, whether it's in this journey or into the next. Have a safe and adventurous journey.
Cheers, Mike. Instead of goodbye, it's just cheers.